Daniel Holt returned to his late father's lake house hoping for silence, a place untouched by chaos, tucked behind tall pine trees and surrounded by calm water, the kind of place where you could hear your own thoughts again. But the moment he stepped out of his truck, he sensed something was off. A slow, deliberate engine hum rolled across the gravel road, followed by the sight of a white luxury SUV creeping past the property line. The vehicle stopped, reversed, then stopped again directly in front of Daniel's gate. Inside was Karen Whitmore, the iron-fisted ruler of the Whitmore Lakeside HOA, dressed in money and attitude. Sunglasses that hid judgmental eyes, a clipboard like a weapon, shoulders pulled back as if the whole town belonged to her. Daniel muttered to himself, "You've got to be kidding." He wasn't even unpacked yet, and already he felt the pressure of her stare. She didn't see a homeowner, she saw a problem she was eager to control. And quietly, ominously, the lake that had once brought him peace now reflected the first signs of a storm. Karen marched up the porch with the confidence of a queen expecting tribute. Her heels hit the wood like a judge's gavel. No greeting, no smile. Just her voice, sharp and rehearsed. "This house violates Lakeside Aesthetic Code Section 4. Daniel blinked, half amused, half annoyed. "Ma'am, I'm not in your HOA. Karen didn't even flinch. Her smile was thin and cruel. "Everything within walking distance of my lake is under my rules." That was her power. Not real authority, imagined authority. But she wielded it like steel. To argue with her was to give her more oxygen. So, Daniel didn't. Instead, he quietly stepped aside and said, "I'm in the middle of a meeting. Please leave." Karen's eyes sharpened. A meeting? With who? Daniel simply closed the door, her question hanging in the air. Inside, at the dining table, sat State Attorney General Evelyn Park, calmly reviewing documents like she was reading someone's obituary. Karen didn't know it yet, but she had just picked the perfect day to ruin her own career.
Inside the lake house, the atmosphere tightened like a noose. Evelyn Park was not just respected, she was feared. Her presence carried a quiet authority that made grown men correct their posture. She sat at Daniel's table, flipping through a thick folder labeled Whitmore HOA, Complaints. Each page a documented wound inflicted by Karen's regime. Evelyn didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her silence was pressure. She closed the folder with a soft thud. "Daniel, if these allegations are accurate, the Whitmore HOA is in serious legal danger." Daniel nodded. "That's why I called you. People here needed help." Before Evelyn could ask another question, bang, bang, bang. The bangs rattled the window panes. Karen's voice pierced through the house like a drill. "I know you're in there! HOA inspection!" Evelyn didn't flinch. She simply turned her head slowly toward the door. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, the kind of look that meant Karen had just stepped onto a landmine. Karen didn't knock again. She barged through the side door, not even checking if she had permission, stumping into the living room with authority she believed was absolute. She entered mid-sentence, shouting, "You cannot ignore it!" Then she saw Evelyn. Her entire body froze. Eyes widened. Her clipboard slipped from her hand and clattered on the hardwood floor, a sound that echoed the collapse of her confidence. Karen looked like she had accidentally walked into a courtroom she was about to lose. Evelyn didn't move, didn't blink. She spoke in a voice cold enough to freeze the air. "You just forced entry into private property." Karen stammered. I didn't know. I thought this house, the HOA." She was unraveling, trying to stitch together a lie while drowning in the truth. Daniel didn't interfere. He simply leaned against the counter, watching karma happen in real time.
Evelyn rose from her chair with slow, deliberate control, a predator's calm. Her presence filled the room and the tension thickened.
She glanced at Karen like she was reading a case file in human form. "You represent the Whitmore Lakeside HOA, correct?" Karen nodded stiffly, more sweat than confidence now. Evelyn tapped the stack of files. One tap, two taps, each like a countdown. "Then you should know your organization has been under state investigation for months." The words landed like a slap. Karen's face fell, shock draining the color from her cheeks. Evelyn continued. "Illegal fines, unlawful surveillance, harassment, fabricated lake regulations, abuse of authority." Karen shook her head violently. "No, this is all blown out of proportion. A misunderstanding." Evelyn stepped closer. "No, Miss Whitmore, this is a pattern." The room felt smaller. Karen felt smaller. Daniel quietly sipped his water, appreciating a rare moment where justice didn't need to be forced. The crunch of tires on gravel broke the silence. A vehicle approached. Daniel peeked through the blinds. Sheriff Blake. Seconds later, Blake stepped inside, expecting another petty HOA complaint. "All right, Karen, what did you—" He froze, slightly straightened his posture. "Attorney General Park, I didn't realize you were here." Evelyn nodded calmly. "Good timing, Sheriff. Miss Whitmore has just forced entry into this home." Karen's panic exploded. "No, Sheriff, listen. This is Daniel's fault. He's violating HOA." Blake held up a tired hand. "Karen, you don't run the law." He placed a gentle but firm hand on her shoulder, not quite arresting her, but definitely restraining the situation. He sighed deeply. "You need to step outside." Karen's eyes darted between Daniel and Evelyn. Anger, fear, desperation twisted together. She pointed at Daniel as she was led out the door. "This isn't over, Holt." Daniel replied softly. "You're right. It's just beginning."
Outside, Karen paced on the porch like a storm trapped in human form. Her carefully built world, her rules, her authority, her reputation was cracking in real time. Sheriff Blake stayed close, arms crossed, giving her no escape route. Inside, through the window, Daniel watched her gesture wildly, trying to reassemble her shattered confidence. Karen stabbed a finger toward the lake, screaming, "That water is under my control! I have legal dominion!" But there was a tremble in her voice now, a crack, a fear she couldn't hide. Sheriff Blake shook his head slowly. "Karen, you don't have dominion over a puddle." Karen's hands curled into frustrated fists. She wasn't used to losing, and she especially wasn't used to losing in front of an audience, or someone more powerful than her. Inside, Evelyn watched calmly from the doorway, her eyes sharp and calculating. To her, this wasn't a confrontation, it was evidence collecting itself. Karen didn't know it yet, but everything she did now was sealing her own fate. The moment Karen was escorted back inside, Evelyn shifted into full investigative mode. Her tone changed, firmer, colder, the voice of someone who had broken corrupt officials before breakfast. She placed a recorder gently on the table. "Miss Whitmore, for the record, I need you to answer some questions." Karen's breath hitched. She wasn't used to being questioned. She was used to being obeyed. Evelyn flipped to a page in the file. 39 residents reporting illegal fines. Flip. 17 complaints of harassment. Flip. Unauthorized surveillance cameras installed facing homes. Karen swallowed hard. That's community safety." Evelyn cut her off with a raised hand. "No, that's a violation of privacy and state law." Sheriff Blake stood in the corner, arms folded, listening, though his eyes softened toward Daniel, as if silently apologizing for what the HOA had become. Karen finally sat down, no longer by choice, but by gravity. Her world was crumbling like sand under her heels. The room dimmed as clouds drifted over the lake outside. Daniel stepped forward, finally taking center stage. "Karen, you didn't just harass me, you harassed everyone on this lake for years." Karen looked away, jaw tight. Daniel placed a USB drive on the table. Security footage, interviews, digital evidence gathered from neighbors too afraid to speak. Evelyn picked it up carefully. "What's on this?" Daniel answered, "The truth." Karen's eyes widened. She recognized the label. Her voice cracked slightly. You can't use that. It's illegal." Evelyn shook her head. "No, Daniel collected this on his property. Lawful." Karen grabbed the arm of her chair, knuckles white. This was the first time in her life she realized she wasn't the hunter. She was the prey.
Sheriff Blake shifted uncomfortably, then finally admitted something he'd been holding inside. "Karen, I tried to warn you." She looked up, betrayed and confused. You said you supported me. You told me." Blake interrupted firmly. "I told you to stop. I told you the community was complaining. I told you you were pushing boundaries." Karen shook her head, denial flooding her eyes. "You never said I was under investigation." Blake nodded slowly. "I didn't know, but I suspected something was coming." Karen felt the betrayal hit her chest like a hammer. Even her closest ally was against her now. Daniel watched the scene quietly, not out of cruelty, but because he'd seen this pattern before. When someone who abuses power finally faces consequences, they always act surprised. Karen stood suddenly, breath shaking. Something wild sparked behind her eyes. She stormed toward the window, pointing at the lake. "That lake is protected. You can't prove I did anything wrong. The HOA rules." Evelyn's voice sliced through her panic. "HOA rules do not override state law, and right now you're obstructing an active investigation." Karen's face twisted, fear and rage blending dangerously. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers, dialing someone quickly. Daniel watched her closely. Who was she calling? A lawyer? Her board? Someone worse. Karen hissed into the phone. "Activate it now!" Evelyn's eyes sharpened. "Miss Whitmore, what exactly did you just activate?" Karen smiled, a shaky, desperate smile. "You'll see." And for the first time all day, Daniel felt a chill move up his spine. A sudden blaring echoed across the water, a sharp metallic siren rising from somewhere near the HOA clubhouse. The sound bounced off the lake, piercing the peaceful air. Residents came outside, confused and frightened. Evelyn moved toward the window. "What is that?" Karen finally regained a bit of twisted pride. "That," she said smugly, "is our HOA emergency compliance system. If anyone violates lake conduct, the siren alerts the community. And today, you all violated it." Evelyn turned slowly toward Daniel. "This is illegal." Daniel nodded. "I know." Karen crossed her arms triumphantly. "You want to investigate me? Fine. But now the entire neighborhood is watching. Let's see how you handle them." Outside, dozens of HOA loyalists were gathering, staring toward Daniel's house, waiting for orders. The showdown had begun. The siren continued screaming across the lake, vibrating through the windows. One by one, homeowners stepped out of their houses, confused at first, then angry, then locked onto Daniel's lake house like it was some kind of battlefield. 40, 50, maybe more. Some looked nervous, some excited, but all of them were turning into Karen's army without even realizing it. Karen stepped onto the porch like a dictator reclaiming her throne.
Her voice rose above the siren. HOA members, you are witnesses to a crime! Daniel felt the floor tremble under her words. Sheriff Blake muttered, "She's calling a public tribunal." Evelyn didn't move. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes burned. Karen believed she'd regained power. She was wrong. This wasn't her army. This was evidence, a crowd of manipulated people witnessing her final downfall. Evelyn finally walked out onto the porch, the wind lifting her jacket like a slow, dramatic reveal. Instantly, the crowd quieted. They didn't recognize her, but they felt her presence. Karen turned sharply. "Get back inside! This is an HOA matter!" Evelyn didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "I am State Attorney General Evelyn Park. Stand back." The crowd froze. Whispers shot through them like sparks. "Attorney General? Why is she here? Karen said this was civil." Karen's smile broke for the first time. Her voice dropped. You had no right to bring her here." Daniel stepped out behind Evelyn, calm as ever. She asked to come. And that was the moment the crowd sensed it, the shift, the energy, the downfall building like thunder. Desperation twisted Karen's posture as she tried to explain away the siren, the intrusion, all of it. "Residents, listen to me! He's lying! This man is trying to take over our lake, our community! He's breaking rules you all agreed to!" Evelyn lifted a binder and held it forward. "Your HOA charter hasn't been updated legally in 12 years. Half these rules are unenforceable. Several are illegal." The crowd gasped. Mark Bennett, the vice president, stepped forward looking pale. "Karen, you said the charter was certified last year." Karen shot him a glare sharp enough to cut steel. "Shut up, Mark!" But the damage was done. Doubt spread across the crowd like ink bleeding through water. Daniel watched carefully. This wasn't just a confrontation. This was an awakening.
A woman from the crowd, an older resident named Mrs. Lawson, stepped closer. Her voice shook, but it carried weight. "Karen, you fined me $600 for having my grandkids over for a picnic." Others murmured. Another man spoke up. "She charged me $200 a day because my mailbox was too rural." A third. "She tried to ban my service dog." Blake looked stunned. He hadn't heard half of these stories. Evelyn took mental notes, eyes sharp. Meanwhile, Karen tried to maintain her grip. No, these are lies. These people are ungrateful. I keep this community safe by trespassing," another resident whispered. Karen's face collapsed into panic. Her empire wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing publicly. Evelyn stepped beside the siren control box Karen had installed behind Daniel's property line. The wires were sloppily concealed under fake bushes. Unauthorized surveillance, unauthorized security system, unapproved signal installation. Evelyn bent down and pulled the main fuse with a sharp snap. The siren died instantly. Silence flooded the lake, the kind that feels heavier than sound. Karen panicked. "You can't shut that off. That's HOA property." "It's not on HOA land." She pointed to a metal marker hidden in the dirt. "Property line, Daniel's side." The crowd murmured again. Karen staggered backward. Her last weapon disabled. Daniel felt a slow, deep satisfaction settle in his chest. Not revenge, not victory, just justice. Karen's breathing became erratic. Her chest rose and fell like she was drowning in her own rage. She pointed directly at Daniel. "You think you've won? You think bringing her," she jabbed a shaking finger toward Evelyn, "is going to save you?" She stepped closer, eyes wild.
I built this community. I made these rules. I decide who belongs and who doesn't. Blake moved toward her cautiously. Karen, calm down. But she didn't. She walked right up to Daniel, practically face to face, spitting with hatred. You don't belong here. You never did. Daniel didn't flinch. He just looked at her calmly and said, I bought this land legally. You broke into my house illegally. Your reign is over. Karen let out a trembling, guttural scream, a sound filled with fear, anger, and the final unraveling of someone who always thought she was untouchable. Then she did something no one expected. She lunged toward the lake, reaching for something hidden under the dock. Evelyn and Blake both reacted instantly. Cut to black. The showdown was only beginning.
Karen bursts into Daniel's lake house with the HOA board in tow, all of them wet from the rain, breathing hard, clutching their phones as recording devices, ready to catch him. But the moment her voice echoes through the living room, she stops dead. Because standing there isn't just Daniel, it's Attorney General Evelyn Park, holding an open folder, Daniel sitting calmly across from her, Sheriff Blake standing between them like private security. The atmosphere shifts instantly. Electric, suffocating, humiliating. Karen tries to recover. I'm conducting an HOA inspection. This property is under my jurisdiction. Evelyn slowly closes the folder, eyes sharp. Ma'am, you just forced entry into a private residence during an active state meeting. Karen realizes this is no longer about a fence dispute. She's crossed into criminal territory. Her board members start whispering behind her, nervous, backing away toward the door. But it's too late. The Attorney General looks straight at Daniel. Is this the woman you mentioned? And Daniel nods once. That single nod feels like the hammer lowering. Karen's face drains. The storm outside cracks like punctuation. Evelyn Park slides a thick binder across the table. Karen watches it move like a bomb being placed in front of her. It's labeled, Whitmore HOA Preliminary Investigation Findings. Inside, evidence of Karen misusing HOA dues, faked violation notices, committee meetings that never happened, payments to a consultant who is actually her cousin, and for the final blow, a signed HOA document falsely claiming jurisdiction over Daniel's lake property. Karen tries to speak, but Evelyn cuts her off. We subpoenaed this yesterday. You forged a jurisdiction claim. Every HOA board member suddenly steps away from Karen, palms up, as if distancing themselves from a wild animal. Mr. Bennett shakes his head. Karen, you told us this was standard procedure. Karen stumbles backward. No, that's taken out of context. Sheriff Blake folds his arms, watching her unravel. The room is still. Only the rain outside fills the silence. This is the first time Karen realizes the power she thought she had. It doesn't exist outside the HOA bubble she created. She paces, talking to herself more than anyone else. I built this neighborhood. I kept it beautiful. I enforced standards. I made order. Her voice cracks. Then she points at Daniel, trembling. This is his fault. He moved in, and everything started falling apart. Daniel doesn't even respond. His silence hits her harder than shouting would. Evelyn watches Karen closely, studying her unraveling mental state. You didn't enforce order. You created fear. The line hits Karen like a slap. She sags. For the first time, her authority is gone. Her certainty is gone. Her identity is cracking.
Sheriff Blake steps forward. Karen Whitmore, I'm placing you under temporary detainment pending formal charges. Karen gasps in betrayal. Sheriff, you're supposed to protect the HOA. He shakes his head. I'm supposed to protect the law. As he takes out the cuffs, Karen lunges toward Evelyn Park, but Daniel moves first. He stands between them, not aggressively, but decisively, forcing Karen back with nothing but presence. Karen finally breaks. She collapses to her knees, hands limp, mascara running. "I'm not a criminal. I was just trying to keep everything perfect." Sheriff Blake gently lifts her to her feet. The cuffs click. Her board members stare, completely shell-shocked. Some record, others cry. Karen's reign ends in the most humiliating way possible, not with defiance, but with defeat. Within minutes, patrol cars arrive. Neighbors start emerging under umbrellas, shocked as they watch Karen being escorted out of Daniel's home in handcuffs. Phones rise. Videos start recording. Voices whisper, "Is that the Attorney General? What did Karen do? She broke into his house? She forged documents?" Daniel stands on the porch beside Evelyn Park. They don't speak. They don't need to. This moment speaks for itself. The woman who once patrolled the neighborhood like its self-appointed queen now sits in the back of a cruiser, windows fogging from her own panicked breath. The HOA board members scatter, terrified of being next. Rain falls like a cleansing curtain across the entire street.
The next morning, the news explodes. Drone footage of the lake house, clips of Karen in handcuffs, interviews with neighbors about years of abuse. The headlines spread everywhere. HOA president arrested during state investigation. Attorney General exposes widespread HOA corruption. Daniel becomes the quiet center of the story. Everyone wants quotes from him, but he refuses interviews. Instead, he spends the day repairing the door Karen broke through. Evelyn calls him with an update. The HOA will be restructured. A temporary state-appointed manager will run operations until elections. Daniel finally breathes deeply, like he hasn't breathed freely in months. Peace is returning, and not just to him, to the entire neighborhood. Evelyn Park visits the lake house one last time. Sunset glows orange over the water. The reflection is calm, healing. She hands Daniel a sealed envelope. "What's this?" "Official notice. Your property is legally certified as outside any HOA, permanently." Daniel laughs softly, disbelief mixing with relief. Evelyn extends her hand. "You handled this with restraint most people wouldn't have shown." Daniel shakes her hand firmly. As she leaves, Daniel walks down to the dock, sits at the edge, and watches the peaceful lake he fought for. Sometimes peace isn't given. Sometimes you have to stand up and take it back.